Before we start talking about the Slavic migration into the Balkans during the 5th and 6th century, we have to look at the area prior to their arrival. Most of the Balkans have always been kind of poorly settled due to its mountains and thick forests. The cities and towns that did exist were either by major inland routes or the sea. The towns below this line were largely Greek, whereas the towns above it had more mixed population. For example, the towns near the sea were very much Latin as opposed to the towns which were more inland. These probably still spoke Latin as it was the main trading language in the area, but they were mostly made up of Illyrian, Thracian, Dacian, and the remnants of some Germanic tribes. However, when the area came under the control of the Byzantines, even the northern cities started to get more Hellenized. Now that we covered the cities, let's look at the countryside. What little of it was populated was mostly either by the descendants of retired Roman soldiers, which oftentimes at the end of their service were given land in the Balkan region, and or Illyrians, Thracians, Dacians, Greeks, and again some remnants of Germanic tribes. And even though this may seem like a lot of people, numbers wise it truly wasn't. There was also no clear predominant division between these farming settlements. It would be completely common to find valley with Illyrian farmers next to a valley of Germanic farmers next to two more valleys that were not settled. It is also reasonable to assume that all these people intermingled in one way or another, creating a small but diverse population. Furthermore, the reason why the Balkans were so poorly settled and had a low economic development was because of its geography. As mentioned before, due to the mountainous and forested nature of the area and its location right next to the Pannonian Plain meant that many nomadic tribes could easily raid into the region and then quickly retreat before any kind of defense could be mounted, as it took a long time to transport troops in the region. Now that we have a small understanding of the area, let's look at the Slavic migration into the Balkans. Prior to their main arrival in the 6th century, the Balkans suffered major raids from the Germanic and Hunnic tribes. We have written records stating that small towns were abandoned, roads were destroyed, and a large chunk of the population fled. The remaining people in the area lived in sizable fortified towns, which were mostly left alone during the raids. It is possible that some Slavs came to the Balkans with these Germanic and Hunnic tribes as early as the 3rd century, but even with that it would be a very small percentage. The main wave of the Slavs came during the 6th century, continuing into the 7th. The migration went either through the lower Danube region, however due to a more direct Byzantine control of that area and the fact that it was more populated as it was largely spared during the raiding period meant that this wasn't a popular spot of crossing for the Slavs. That is why the majority of the Slavic tribes went through the Moravian and Zemplin passes into the Pannonian Basin and then into the Balkans. Now it is important to understand that this Slavic migration didn't happen at once. It was more than a century-long affair of migration with intertwined larger and smaller waves of settlers coming into the region. So why didn't the Byzantines stop the Slavs? Well, there are multiple reasons why the Byzantines didn't protect the Balkans from the Slavic settlers, even though it was under their control. First, it was because the Slavs left the towns and cities alone, settling in the countryside that wasn't either populated in the first place or was abandoned due to the raids. This happened on such a large scale that Procopius and other writers mentioned that cities in the Balkans were like islands in a Slavic sea. So to the Byzantines there was nothing really to protect since the Slavs were taking up area that was empty in the first place. This also meant that some Byzantines were happy with the Slavs as they were rebuilding and resettling the area that was destroyed before. Second reason why the Byzantines didn't stop the Slavs was because during much of the early Slavic migration, Justinian was busy reconquering Italy, and even if they had some free armies to fight the Slavs, Procopius writes that it was almost impossible, as if the Byzantines defeated or made a pact with one tribe, the arrangement was valid for just one small group and had no effect on any other tribe. The Slavic disunity can be seen in the various ways they settled the Balkans. The first wave of the Slavs were mostly peaceful settlers minding their own business, but after them in the 560s, Slavic tribes living outside of the Byzantine Empire held frequent yearly raids that went as far as northern Greece. And since there were already some Slavs living in the Balkans, it was obvious that many Slavic tribes didn't care much for each other, fighting between themselves as often as fighting against others. These yearly raids culminated during the 570s and 80s when Avars came to Central Europe and started to solidify their rule over the Slavic tribes in the area. As such, the Slavs that were still living on the border with the Byzantine Empire held much larger raids into the Balkans than before. We have an account of one of these raids by John of Ephesus, but we know there were more raids than just one. These raids were different than the ones prior to this. First, because they were much larger, involving hundreds of thousands of people, and second, after the raiding stopped, instead of going back to the Avar-controlled territory, the Slavs just stayed at the Balkans. The Avars, not wanting to be left out from all the raiding, also started to raid the Balkans, including the newly settled Slavs. All of this was possible at the time because Byzantine army was fighting the Persians in the east. There were basically no soldiers left to protect the western regions of the empire. When the Persians' war ended in 591, Emperor Maurice finally could address the Avar and Slavic problem. In the year 600, he managed to drive out the Avars along with some of the Slavs, but the majority of them have already settled into a farming life in the area, at this point numbering hundreds of thousands if not millions. And even though the Byzantines tried the age-old Roman tactic of resettling tribes throughout the empire, sending some Slavs to Anatolia and even the Caucasus, it didn't prove effective as these were small numbers compared to the actual Slavic population of the Balkans at this point. During the 7th century, as the wars between the Avars and Byzantines continued, so did the constant flow of Slavic people fleeing the Avar Khanate and settling into the Balkans. The north now being almost completely Slavic and the south starting to get more and more settlements. There were even some accounts of Slavs trying to raid and settle Greek islands. It was also during this time that many cities and towns which held out, like islands, to Slavic assimilation started to be slowly quote-unquote converted. Now, it is important to note that even though some of these towns were militarily conquered, most of them were just peacefully assimilated over time into the much larger Slavic population. It is also important to recognize that during this time there was lots of fighting and power grabbing in the Balkans, so even though the recognized area of Byzantine control was this, there were lots of autonomous areas, some of which still saw themselves as part of the empire, some of which didn't, some of which were subdued by the Byzantines, some of which were not, and then add the Avars for even more complications. So the Balkans were in this constant flux of uncertain political control by various groups, but by far the Byzantines usually ended up having the upper hand in the end. The Balkans, now almost completely settled by the Slavs, formed a dialect continuum. This means that even though we are certain the numerous Slavic tribes had many different dialects, they still can understand each other, and even though this continuum still exists in a different form to this day, there are clear differences from the one now to the one in the early 7th century. One of these changes to this continuum was the arrival of the Croats and the Serbs. They arrived around the early to middle 7th century to find numerous Slavic tribes already living in the Balkans. So where the Croats and Serbs came from is very much still debated. We know for sure they came from the lands north of the Danube, as this is where all the Slavs in the Balkans came from. However, the specifics of why they decided to come to the Balkans and how they managed to become so prominent in a sea of many different Slavic tribes is still largely unknown. The likeliest origin is that the Serbs and Croats, just as many other Slavic tribes, were under the Avar control going into the 7th century. They didn't use the commotion and the Khanate's instability during the Samos independence war to migrate into a more favorable area in the Balkans. This theory is supported by the fact that the formation of Samos kingdom correlates with the dates of our presumed understanding of Serbian and Croatian arrival into the Balkans. It is also very much possible that this wasn't just a single one-off migration by these two groups, and the trickle of Serbian and Croatian people continued into the 8th and 9th century. Once the two tribes established themselves, they quickly started to influence the people around them, which can be seen today by the fact that the people in the area speak a variation of the Serbo-Croatian language. Also, during this time, some of the people in this area migrated northwest into today's Slovenia. Here they found Western Slavic tribes from Moravia which came to the area during the first Slavic wave in the 6th century. However, more waves may have occurred all the way till the fall of Samos Empire. This mix of Slavic tribes resulted in a unique Slovenian culture and language which today isn't either Western Slavic nor Serbo-Croatian. This area was at start controlled by the Byzantines, then conquered by the Avars, and briefly vassalized by Samos kingdom. But when Samo died, large part of the area fell back to the Avars. Nonetheless, a small county, Carantania, managed to remain independent, partly due to the natural mountainous protection and partly due to the Frankish influence in the area. Then in 745, being threatened by the Avars and most likely pressured by the Bavarians, the county first became part of Bavaria and then annexed by the Carolingian Empire along with the lands lost to the Avars after the death of Samo. During the 8th century, Byzantines, Croats, Serbs, and Avars all had some sort of political power match within today's Serbo-Croatian area. However, due to the unreliable and sparse written records, there's nothing we can say for certain about this area during this time. It is most likely that during the struggle, the Serbs and Croats established some political autonomy, but the extent of that autonomy is unknown. Nevertheless, we can presume that the Serbian Vlastimirovic dynasty was established and the precursor to the Croatian duchies of Pannonia and Dalmatia may have started to form shape. Although this wouldn't have been actual duchies as feudalism still wasn't in the area. They would have been more of a coalition of tribes trying to fight for autonomy against the Avars, Byzantines, and other surrounding tribes. But while all of this was happening, there was another group which shaped South Slavic history and one we have more reliable sources about. The Bulgars were a coalition of nomadic Turkic tribes originating somewhere from Central Asia. Over time, this group also absorbed some Iranian, Hunnic and other Indo-European people, but their lifestyle remained very much nomadic. During the early 7th century, they inhabited the area of today's eastern Ukraine, but were under the control of the Avars. That all started to change when the Avars and Sassanids made an anti-Byzantine alliance. The Romans, feeling threatened, quickly started to look for allies of their own. They made friends with the powerful Bulgar Dulo clan, and as a sign of friendship, the clan sent some of its children to the Byzantine court. One of these children was Kubrat, who was said to be a quick learner and had great admirations for the Byzantines. While at the Roman court, Kubrat was said to have converted to Christianity before returning back home. Once Kubrat returned, he used what he learned from the Romans and managed to unite the other Bulgar tribes under one banner, promising to free them from the Avars. Then presumably during the Byzantine Sassanid War, when Avars were busy raiding the Balkans, Kubrat rebelled and won. Quickly after this victory, he solidified his power and became the ruler of what we call Great Bulgaria. Continuing on, Great Bulgaria and the Byzantines had a close relationship, and Kubrat's reign was very prosperous for the Bulgarian people. He eventually died around 650s and 60s, leaving the kingdom to his sons. With their distrust of each other combined with the Khazar aggression, the brothers divided up the kingdom and led their people to settle different areas within Europe. One of these brothers, Asparuh, who traveled along the Black Sea, quickly came into a dispute with the Byzantines. After a few battles, the most decisive one being the Battle of Ongal, he managed to win and settle the area of Lower Danube in 681, which is regarded as the foundation year of modern Bulgaria. A few years later, another brother of Asparuh, Kuber, who first went to the Pannonian Plain and became an Avar vassal, rebelled and migrated with his people to an area of modern-day Macedonia. Here, after a few battles, he became a Byzantine vassal around the end of 680s, and this is where all written records about Kuber and his people end, presumably settling and assimilating into the local population. This population being overwhelmingly Slavic. In fact, the Slavic population in the lands settled by the Bulgars was so numerous that after just 2 centuries the Bulgar language died off, and what remains to this day is a Bulgaro-Macedonian Slavic language. What the Bulgars managed to achieve in the next 2 centuries is impressive and could easily have its own video. In a very brief way, they established the first Bulgar Empire, and even though it had some setbacks on occasion with some internal strife, they managed to expand into much of southeastern Europe by the 9th century. They accomplished this through carefully crafted diplomatic actions, numerous military victories, and expansion into the former Avar territory. This meant that Bulgaria stretched from the Black Sea to Pest, from the Dniester to the Ionian Sea. But Bulgaria had a problem. It was still pagan in an increasingly Christianized world. Boris I knew that converting would result in far better diplomatic relations, but he was already afraid of the increasing Byzantine influence in his realm, so his first idea was to convert to Roman Catholicism rather than Eastern Orthodox. However, this brief flirt with Catholicism didn't last, because in 864 Boris lost the war with the Byzantines and in the peace treaty agreed to convert to Eastern Orthodox along with his people. Naturally, no one was happy, as Boris didn't want the increased Byzantine influence over Bulgaria, and the Bulgarian people didn't want to change from their pagan beliefs. But Boris had a plan in mind. He quickly suppressed the rebellious populace and then invited the exiled disciples of Cyril and Methodius, which were no longer welcomed in Moravia. He then ordered them to translate the Greek liturgy into Old Bulgarian using the Glagolitic alphabet. This way, Boris could expel the Greek priests and replace them with his own Bulgarian priests, all while not breaking the treaty. The clerics quickly got to work, but Glagolitic proved not ideal for Old Bulgarian, and so the new Cyrillic alphabet based off of the older Glagolitic was created. From there, Cyrillic quickly spread through the Slavic Orthodox lands, replacing Glagolitic as the main Slavic alphabet, although there were some continuous remnants of the use of Glagolitic all the way till the 19th century, mainly in Croatian church services. The Bulgarian Golden Age wouldn't however last forever. First, the Magyar arrived in the 10th century, threatening the Bulgarian borders. Second, the new powerful Kievan Rus started to take much of Bulgarian trade and influence. And lastly, the continuous Byzantine hostility all culminated in the Bulgarian vassalization by the Byzantines in the early 11th century. Going back to the end of the 8th century in the Serbo-Croatian region, we're starting to get more sources which is correlated with the arrival of Franks and Christianity into the region. We learn of Vyacheslav of Serbia, the first reliable mention of a ruler of the Serbian Vlastimirovic dynasty, starting in around 780 and was most likely overseen in one way or another by the Byzantines. We also learn of Vyacheslav of Croatia, or more precisely Dalmatia, who lived around the same time and is most well known for his early attempt of trying to convert Dalmatia to Christianity and his eventual defeat at the hands of the Franks, after which Croatian Dalmatia became part of the Frankish Empire and Croatian Pannonia became a vassal. So at the beginning of the 9th century, the area kind of looked like this, with the Slavic lands being ruled by Slavic rulers, but overall very much under the sphere of influence by the two major powers, at least until Ljudevit became Duke of Pannonia in 810. He was raided by the Frankish Duke of Friuli, and after the Emperor Louis the Pious decided not to punish the Duke, enraged Ljudevit rebelled in 819. He quickly started to recruit allies, most notably from the Slovenian Carantania. After making some initial gains, the triple armies of the Frankish king, the Duchy of Friuli, and the Croatian Dalmatia, which was now ruled by Brona, the successor of Vyacheslav of Dalmatia, proved to be overwhelming for Ljudevit, who lost in 822 and escaped to the Serbian lands. He was welcomed by the successor of Vyacheslav of Serbia, Radoslav, but Ljudevit had different plans. He killed Radoslav and tried to take control of Serbia. What exactly happened after that, we don't know, but presumably it didn't go well, as Ljudevit in 823 escaped to Croatian Dalmatia, now ruled by Ľudomisl. But Ľudomisl, just as his predecessor Brona, was loyal to the Franks, and so he promptly killed Ljudevit, ending the Croatian rebellion. With that, the Frankish rule over Croatia was solidified, and the Croatian-Serbian border became the divide between the Frankish sphere of influence and the Byzantine sphere of influence, which can be kind of seen today in the division of religion and alphabet in the Balkans. Later on in Croatian Dalmatia, Trpimir I, who established the Trpimirovic dynasty that ruled Croatia until 1091, would successfully gain autonomy by playing the Byzantines and Franks off of each other. However, the recognized autonomous kingdom of Croatia wouldn't be established until the Dalmatian annexation of Croatian Pannonia in 924-25. It was also during this time that Catholic church influence in the area solidified and pagan practices overall ended in Croatia. In Serbia, on the other hand, the succession crisis caused by Ljudevit was quickly solved by Vlastimir, who consolidated his power in Serbia around the 830s, but still remained under the influence of the Byzantines. He was also faced with the problem of Bulgar advancement towards the Serbian lands, but against all odds defended his realm, supposedly with no Byzantine help. During the rest of his reign, Vlastimir consolidated his power and managed to gain Serbian independence from the Byzantines. How exactly he did that, we have no written sources about. After his death in late 840s, his sons started a long succession war which was won by Mutimir. Mutimir went on to oversee even more successful campaigns against the Bulgars and also the Christianization of the country into the Eastern Orthodoxy. And even though there's countless of events I could talk about going on from here, or address your comments of why I didn't talk about White Croatia or White Serbia, which are just foundation myths, I will leave it off here. With Bulgars starting their golden age and ruling over their Macedonian brothers, the Serbs finally independent from the Byzantine rule, Croatians free from the Frankish sphere of influence, and Slovenians, well, under German control for a long time. This is not to say that all these lands were just Slavic at this point. There were still most likely some remnants of Roman, Illyrian, German, etc. settlements. However, compared to the bigger overall picture, they were a small speck in the Balkan Slavic political sphere. Please consider subscribing and supporting me on Patreon, as YouTube has still not accepted my monetization for some reason, and any financial help would be appreciated. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can read my full script with sources for free on Patreon, and as always, there's more historical information and clarification in the description. My name is mlaser, and please join me next time when I will look at the early history of Eastern Slavs.